Okay, this speech was given by Hitler in Germany of 1933, right after his rise to power. The purpose was to display Hitler's thoughts and ideas for Germany as a country as he became their leader. This video is valuable because it displays the exact speech that Hitler gave so the audience is able to see the context in which it was given as well as his personal ideas. Although this source is firsthand from Hitler, the speech was given in German. The translation of German to English could be slightly off, perhaps changing some of his exact thoughts.
In 1920, Hitler developed his political platform under the name the German Workers' Party. The Nazi Party grew off of nationalism socialism. Nationalism socialism developed out of attempts to create a nationalist redefinition of socialism as an alternative to both internationalist Marxist socialism and free market capitalism. It rejected the Marxist concept of the struggle relating to class, opposed ideas of equality and international solidarity, and sought to defend private property. Hitler was very charismatic and gained power with his incredible speaking skills, which helped him win over voters. The development of the Nazi Party relied on Hitler's speaking skills and thrived off of the stunted economic status of Germany at the time. The party developed off of Volksgemeinschaft, meaning people's community. From 1918 to 1923, the foundational Nazis were known as part of the Nazi movement that aimed to destroy the Weimar Republic. After the Beer Hall Push, the Nazis turned from confrontation to political manipulation to succeed. They often relied on making promises to the world that often ended up being contradictory to their actions and to their ideology. Once they came into power, the Nazis changed the current institutions into the Nazi equivalent. Soon, expansionism and nationalism took over the majority of their platform.
Nazism is an ideology that received its practical political forms in the law that governed Germany from 1933 to 1945. The political goal of Nazism ideologies is to establish a dictatorial state, where the government is completely dominant in relation to the individual. It is therefore the purpose of the government to control all human activities, both public and private. This idea of the government controlling all human activities relates to anti-communism. Anti-communism is being against the idea of a society where there is a common control of all production and everything is shared or belongs to all. In other words, it is believing in the idea that one person should control everything and everybody. Anti-communism developed in reaction to the rise of the socialism over time. We see it develop mostly through the speeches that Hitler gave, showing off how much of a dominant figure he was and how he controlled private and public activities. Hitler, being this kind of dictator and believing in this kind of government, saw himself as a very powerful leader, as he stated in the Declaration of War on the United States speech. Today, I am at the head of the strongest army in the world, the most gigantic air force, and of a proud navy. This speech is from December 11, 1941 in Germany, and with the purpose to declare war on the United States. This speech is valuable because of the first person used by Hitler to convey his thoughts to the United States, but a limitation of this source is that it was translated from German to English, perhaps causing the message to be worded or conveyed differently. Along with anti-communism, one of the key basics to Nazi ideology is anti-parliamentarism. This is the idea against having a system of democratic government of the state. Hitler knew how much his Nazi Party members wanted to take action against the young German Democratic Republic, but he was smart enough to know that it simply would not work. Instead of trying to take over it and failing right away, Hitler took on a new approach, playing by the rules. We see this anti-parliamentarism develop when Hitler decided to play by the democratic rules and get elected. 1 week before the general election, the Reichstag building burned down. Hitler immediately declared that it was the signal from a communist takeover of the nation. He knew that if he was to convince the president to give him emergency powers, he'd have to play on the president's fear of communism. A communist was caught near the Reichstag building instantly after the fire had started, and those that arrested him claimed that he confessed that the fire was a signal to other communists to overthrow democracy in the country. Hitler then asked President Hindenburg to grant him emergency powers in view of the so-called communist takeover. Hindenburg agreed to pass the law solely for the protection of the people and the state. The law gave Hitler exactly what he wanted, a ban on the communists and socialists taking part in an election campaign, ultimately leaving him in charge and rising to power. Once he was elected chancellor in 1933, he knew that he could then make all the decisions to become a dictator. In other words, Hitler knew how to play the government and trick the people of Germany. Hitler then began to gain control of everybody, including all things in their personal lives. He knew that being in control of what the children learned was also important for the future, so in 1936, Hitler outlawed all other youth groups except for the national organization Hitlerjugend, or Hitler Youth. As an important aspect of the National Socialist Nazi program, the aim of this youth group was to gain complete control over the social and political educations of German children.
Anti-Semitism has been around for centuries in the endless conflicts between Christians and Jews. Furthermore, the Jews were exploited economically and commonly used as scapegoats throughout history. This anti-Semitism worsened in the 19th century when this dislike developed into Judenfrage, or the Jewish question. Anti-Semitics began to accuse the Jews for being intolerant and supportive of national separateness. Socialists saw them as supporters of the capitalist spirit, and conservatives disliked their tendency towards revolution. These ideas became universal and spread anti-Semitism further. Hitler grew up with this Judenfrage idea, and saw the only solution to be the total removal of Jews. He rationalized these beliefs in the texts of Das Zweite Buch. In his most famous book, Mein Kampf, he stated, "If with the help of his Marxist creed, the Jew is victorious over the other peoples of the world, his crown will be the funeral wreath of humanity, and this planet will, as it did millions of years ago, move through the ether devoid of men. Hence today, I believe that I am acting in accordance with the will of the Almighty Creator. By defending myself against the Jew, I am fighting for the work of the Lord." The Jew was associated with capitalism, and the success they found encouraged the Judenfrage concepts. Hitler believed that the Jews corrupted the entire middle class, and he planned on getting rid of this endangerment. Hitler was able to encourage the ideas of Jews as parasites and corrupt beings through his speeches and the political manipulation and his use of propaganda. He presented the Jew as the embodiment of anti-Nazi ideas. Nationalistic ideas and the appraisal of the Aryan race were used to give Germans superiority while denouncing the Jews. This invention of a superior race was justified by Hitler saying, "Those races, today called Aryans, created all the great cultures of the ancient world. Why is it that only Aryans possess the ability to create states? It was due almost exclusively to their attitude toward work. These races which, as the first, stopped seeing work as the result of coercion and saw it rather as a necessity born out of hundreds of thousands of years of hardship, had to become superior to other people." Anti-Semitism was developed over time through the planning of Hitler and its use as a consistent element of his political agenda. A Nazi once said, "Politics is not an idea, but the realization of ambition. Politics is a matter of what is practical. Thus, under certain circumstances, it will not recoil from doing what seems correct, even by devious means. I must adapt myself to changing conditions and must accordingly formulate the political racist concept every time." Through the leadership of Hitler, the oppression of Jews slowly progressed. In his first 6 years of dictatorship alone, from 1933 to 1939, there were 400 decrees and regulations placed on the Jews that restricted their daily lives. They began with the exclusion of Jews from state services due to their status as politically unreliable, restricting the number of Jews allowed in schools or certain professions, implementing taxes solely for the Jews, and preventing ritualistic slaughters in order to prevent them from practicing Jewish dietary laws. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws banned them from citizenship and marriage or sexual relations with German blood citizens. They could also not be admitted to certain hospitals, judges could not cite Jewish written works, and Jewish officers were expelled from the army. Students were even banned from taking certain tests in order to prevent Jews from becoming specific professions. From 1937 to 1938, the persecution of German Jews began. First, they began to segregate the Jews and ban them from Aryan zones, and they had to identify themselves with identity cards and special passports. Eventually, they started taking them away from their families, and the Holocaust began, leading to their mass murder.
German nationalism is the idea that asserts that Germans are a part of a superior nation and promotes the cultural unity of all German people. German nationalism began to develop previous to World War II. It was a major motivating factor for many of the individuals who chose to join the Nazi Party, which greatly promoted German nationalism. These people felt that nationalism was an important factor in bringing the struggling nation back together. After World War I, Germany was suffering due to losses and economic strain placed on the country by the Treaty of Versailles. With Germany at its weakest and most vulnerable point, Hitler was able to use nationalism not only to gain following for the Nazi Party, but he was also able to manipulate German nationalism portrayed in the media to a kind of ethnic nationalism and convince people to think that the white German bloodline was exclusive and superior to all other races and ethnicities. He referred to this race of people as Aryans, and he used the media as a form of propaganda to get German citizens to accept his philosophies. Much of his propaganda included nationalist themes which portrayed a better way of life in Germany and a superior nation under his rule. This was motivating to the citizens struggling from conditions in post-World War I Germany. This image is a piece of Nazi propaganda from previous to World War II, and it says Es lebe Deutschland, which means long live Germany. It also shows an image of Hitler holding the Nazi flag with a large following of Nazi soldiers. There's light in the background and a large bird. Adolf Hitler is depicted as a brave, heroic leader of the German people, which no doubt he probably was seen through the eyes of Germans at the time. In this poster, Hitler is depicted as leading a mass of people along the edges of what some might assume is the Rhineland. The storm clouds parting, letting through rays of golden sunlight, are shown as German departure of the dark period that followed World War I. The rays of light shining down on the Nazi leader could also suggest that Hitler was a divine ruler, and the eagle could symbolize the majesty and power behind him, making him appear almost godlike in his power. Germany lost World War I, and in the 1919 Treaty of Versailles, the victorious powers imposed territorial, military, and economic provisions on defeated Germany. In the West, Germany returned Alsace-Lorraine to France, which had been seized by Germany more than 40 years earlier. Belgium received Eupen and Malmedy. The industrial Saar region was placed under the administration of the League of Nations for 15 years, and Denmark received northern Schleswig. The Rhineland was also demilitarized, and no German military forces or fortifications were permitted there. With the rising power under Hitler and the Nazi Party, Germany began to take what they felt was rightfully theirs. The German population of 65 million people felt that they were condensed and needed more room to live and to grow. They considered expansion for Lebensraum, meaning living space in German. They felt this was their inalienable right in order to provide for themselves as a nation. A quote from Hitler states, "We are overpopulated and cannot feed ourselves from our own resources," thus bringing up the issue of not only starvation and space. This was also a way for the country to rebel against oppressive Treaty of Versailles. Lebensraum was the most significant of the Nazi Party's foreign policy goals previous to and during World War II. All lands gained in Eastern Europe were to be razed with no consideration for their populations and turned into farmland to feed the superior German people. In fact, all non-Germans in these territories were to be starved into extinction. It was thought that if significant territory could be gained in Eastern Europe and parts of Africa, then the Great Depression occurring in Germany could be solved. Expansionism began with the invasion of Poland and spread throughout World War II. However, Hitler's ambitions were to extend German territory over all 7 continents. On March 12, 1938, the Nazis annexed Austria. Later that year, they marched into Sudetenland, a part of Czechoslovakia, and on the 15th of March 1939, the German army invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia. This brought over 500,000 Jews under German control. The German invasion of Western Poland on the 1st of September 1939 led to the start of the Second World War. Between 1939 and June 1941, the German army invaded and occupied many countries, including the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, Denmark, Yugoslavia, Greece, Norway, and Western Poland. By this time, many millions of Jews were living in territories under German control.
Vocabulary. Volksgemeinschaft. This is German for people's community. The goal of this was to eliminate elitism and break down the social classes in order to achieve a national purpose.
Beer Hall Push, also known as Munich Push, was an attempt to seize power in Munich on the 8th and 9th of November 1923. This failed attempt led to Hitler's arrest with 3 benefits: attention, the publication of Mein Kampf, and the changed focus to propaganda and legitimate means of gaining power instead of force.
Hitlerjugend. In 1936, Hitler outlawed all other youth groups except for the national organization Hitlerjugend, or Hitler Youth. As an important aspect of the National Socialist Nazi program, the aim of this youth group was to gain complete control over the social and political education of the German children.
Judenfrage. This is the name for the debate in Europe on the Jewish problem of their status and treatment. This was used to support the anti-Semitic views of the 20th century.
Lebensraum, the excuse used by Hitler to justify his invasions of Eastern Europe. He claimed that Germany was overpopulated and he needed living space for his people.
Hi, I'm Adolf, and I like warm hugs.